What up, it's Casper. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the 5th episode of Tulsa King. The 5th episode of Tulsa King is called Tilting at Windmills. It's 40 minutes, directed by David Semel. So I give a lot of props for this episode because this episode is 40 minutes and we're bouncing around a lot of people's activities in this episode. So I'll give a huge shout out to the director, who's now the new director on board for this episode. Really interesting perspective and direction with his camera angles because we're seeing a lot of like personality. Really enjoyed the flow of how a lot of the events with a lot of people in this episode felt like a real good transition to everyone's lives. Like the director and the editing did a really good job on cool B-roll shots and cool transitions to what else are we dealing with in this Tulsa world. Talking about people's personal lives, now we're seeing Manfredi and his daughter go to a school to basically sign up his daughter's kids into a school, but Manfredi is not really okay with that school because he finds it a little bit on not the tough side of, you know, the school teaching. He finds it a little bit too soft like charming, trying to convince his daughter Tina not to put her kids in that school. That's one of the many events in this episode that we're seeing. Now a lot of these other characters who are involved with these main characters are now getting their own screen time, on seeing more of their personality and seeing more of like what they do besides it being told a couple times from other episodes. Now we're seeing more of how Tina is doing her mother role perspective, and we're seeing it as an audience, seeing how she thinks about the school and how she thinks about, you know, she's been raising her own kids too, you know, her pops Manfredi. But a lot of personal stuff is going on in this episode with Manfredi's own family. His sister is now working or trying to get a job now at the clinic now. The people who are involved with the clinic get some screen time as well. A lot of stuff in this episode where I'm like, wow, shout out to just the placement on being able to see all this happening in such, in my opinion, such a short amount of time. And that's why I feel like this episode ended up flying by. So Manfredi is dealing with a lot of his personal family stuff, and we're seeing more of him at home type of lifestyle now, but we also bounce back to his enemies that we're dealing with as well. Cal Thresher in this episode, we get more involved with him in this episode. That's one thing that's pretty interesting, the fact that Manfredi's making all these moves. He got his partner Mitch now more involved in this episode too, on just basically trying to purchase that, or basically owning now that car dealership. Now Mitch's personality is getting more involved. He's building more of a character, which I'm enjoying on the Manfredi side. But going back to Cal Thresher, that confrontation between Manfredi and Thresher, you know damn well that that's just gonna escalate even more, and Cal Thresher just is basically just knocking on the door right now. Who knows what is gonna be on the other side. Cal Thresher is now trying to do a lot of stuff to Manfredi to basically not let him succeed. Is absolutely wild. This episode explained that and showed it to us. Prior to a lot of these confrontations, a lot of these scenes in this episode did feel like one of those things that we've been here before and we're seeing these actors shine. But giving props to the characteristics that they're putting in front of our face right now. Really enjoyed the fact that later in this episode we saw action take off, and I feel like this type of action is just going to be a really cool build up and really cool to see what else are we going to see on just the action of beating people up type of perspectives. Really enjoyed Tyson in this episode because at times with his lines and his direction, you could see that really trying to show that he can be involved in these situations. A lot of his character build up with these lines, you could see that Manfredi could see it as well. A lot of the screen time that he's been getting in this season, you can see that he's definitely trying to show that, you know, he's trying to rank up a lot. There's a confrontation moment in this episode where Tyson is basically telling Armand to pay up. Armand took that as a surprise, so you could see as well that even people in Dwight Manfredi's side like Armand could see that Tyson is trying to make a name for himself. It's actually funny at times too, but confidence and the acting is dope, and a lot of the lines they're putting out is very realistic in my opinion, so I enjoyed that, and it's a cool build up. We got Bill dealing with a lot of stuff in this episode as well. They're actually trying to set up a meeting to deal with Manfredi in Atlanta, and the fact that Chicky burned himself out in the other episode, now we're seeing more how Chicky's side knows that he was too drunk and that he actually killed his own father. So that's absolutely insane. Chicky's own people know that, and Chicky has no idea. And a lot of people being involved. The white Manfredi causing so much ruckus between all these other people. Manfredi living rent-free in all these people's heads, and it's very wild. Goody had a good amount of screen time. Pretty funny how he was eating those ribs and trying his best to stay clean, and then he ends up still getting himself dirty. So that was pretty funny too. So you're seeing a lot of people get their screen time where you're like, hey, they're not leaving them hanging at all. The action at the end of the episode is something that was like, finally we got to see something like this. Very sad to see Bodhi get knocked out like that. Bodhi showing his bossness in this episode too. He over there at the wind farm already handling business, making sure the people's is okay, and making sure these are the right people to do business with. Talking about not doing business right, Cal Thresher doing crazy business with the Chinese people, the Chinese gang. So it's gonna be crazy how that's gonna end up unfolding, because Cal Thresher ends up sending the Chinese gang's people to go mess up with the wind farm project, and they destroyed a whole bunch of things. That scene ends up taking off because unwanted people and unwanted territory. Manfredi ends up zooming over there, so you see the whole game pull up. That scene and the camera direction was pretty good. A lot of the hits and a lot of the movements we are able to see, and really like the action thrill of that scene as well, because I feel like, wow, what else are they able to pull off in these type of moments? And this was a moment that I did not expect at all, especially the fact that a gang came and interrupted the project being formed. I really thought that Manfredi wasn't gonna make it on time, so what was gonna happen? And then this crazy brawl just ends up happening. Bigfoot gets a couple hits in there. Tyson, like I said, he's trying to make a name for himself, so he's letting all his anger out with these punches. Sylvester Stallone once again is still doing his thing. They put him in a lot of moments with a lot of characteristics with other people, so I really like how Stallone is still in this episode dealing with a lot of scenarios where you could only imagine how that's going to even unfold if you had to deal with it in person, holding himself down. The end scene was pretty dope, and I really like the fact that Manfredi even went on a date. Manfredi's character is dealing with a lot of things right now, so very interesting how this episode bounced around with a lot of personalities, characteristics, intense moments, action moments. So really cool that this episode could fit all that. Very exciting with all the music that they put in here. Director did a good job on a lot of his B-roll shots, and a lot of good job on just panning his shots, on showing a lot of the intense moments in here, especially with a lot of actors involved with this episode. Very excited to see the sixth one, because now we're back again meeting with a sit down with all the bosses. So that's going to be crazy how that unfolds, and everybody in here dealing with their own personal what's gonna happen moments. So that's why this next episode is gonna be very exciting to see. Tyson's character is growing a lot. Armand dealing with his things. Like, this is just a lot of stuff in this episode where it's like, wow, look at all these characters dealing with their own thing. Very cool, and let's see how this sixth episode goes. So the fifth episode was really dope, and it was a standout for a lot of reasons. After my watching the fifth episode of Tulsa King, Tilting at Windmills, out of 10, I'm gonna have to give this episode a 10 out of 10. So that's my review for the fifth episode of Tulsa King, Tilting at Windmills. Shout out to you guys for tuning into the video. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace, y'all.